Can you all hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. No box?
No box.
Yeah, okay, we did it. All right. It doesn't matter how many times we've used Zoom, it's always a challenge for whatever reason. Okay, so I'm going to show you a list of words, and I'd like you to try to remember as many as you can. Uh, all right. So I know I can't unmute you, but most times when we do something like this, we find that most people are able to remember, for the most part, those words that have some sort of emotional content. And this doesn't only happen for words, it happens when you look at faces with emotional expressions, it happens with stories, it happens with a lot of things. And so this is actually seen in research. Where's my mouse? Um, okay, you can't see my mouse, but so what happens when you look at this graph, so I'll tell you what they did. They recruited individuals with a diagnosis of probable Alzheimer's disease. So these were individuals who were pretty much in the earlier stages of the disease. And so they showed pictures, three pictures actually, that told a story, but the first ones were very neutral. It was like someone coming into the hospital, seen by a doctor, and then leaving the hospital. And then there were a few weeks, about a week after, they showed the participants a different set of pictures that had a bit of more like an emotional content. So the boy who came into the hospital had just had an accident. You know, he was in pain. So it definitely had a more emotional content. And so they asked the participants to rate how arousing that story was, or how much of an emotional impact it had on them. And then they tested their memory at baseline. They tested right after that same day that they showed the pictures. They tested their memory about a week after and 2 weeks after. And if you look at this graph where the red rectangle is, you see that at the first time the participants were asked to remember the story or to tell the story, the participants that heard, or when they asked about the arousing story or the one with the emotional content, they recalled a little bit more details compared to the stories that were neutral. A week after, they still remembered most of the story that had the emotional content, but if you look at the neutral story, they pretty much forgot most of the story. And then if you look at 2 weeks after, then it's very similar. They remember about the same amount of details, but much less than the first time. And of course, you're going to see forgetting over time. Again, these are individuals with in the very early stages of Alzheimer's disease. But it's pretty remarkable, because usually when we give someone a list of words, if you asked someone with dementia or maybe mild cognitive impairment 2 weeks after what those words were, it's very hard to remember even a few words. However, when you show these individuals or you tell these individuals a story, they're actually able to remember many of those details. And that's pretty striking. Again, showing how much impact emotional content can have on our memory and our ability to learn and remember information. Now, what's interesting also about emotions, it's that it's not the same for negative and positive events. So when people are in their 20s or 30s and they hear a story with a negative content and a story with a positive content, it turns out that they remember more about the negative content. So more details about maybe events when they felt scared or sad or angry, and not so much about the ones that have a positive content. But this completely changes in individuals who are about 60, 65 or older, where they're able to pay more attention or at least recall more events that are positive. Now, this is a very interesting phenomenon, and researchers don't know exactly why this happens. Um, and there are a lot of hypotheses about why it may be that the younger you are, the more you pay attention or more you remember negative events, and the older, the more you pay attention to positive things. Um, there's there's one hypothesis is that with life you just start paying attention more to the negative ones, and so if you pay more attention you're more likely to remember that and obviously later recall that. And you'll see that a lot of the slogans that are used are targeted versus for older adults are try to really get to that emotional content, such as like capture those special moments that you may see in different marketing campaigns. It's all geared towards more positive emotions. Um, and so and there's some research showing that individuals who are older than 65 are more able to remember the names of people who are good versus the people that they categorize as bad, where this is kind of the opposite in younger adults. So I think it's a very interesting phenomenon, very positive phenomena, of course, that with time we're able to focus more on the positive events. Now, this is mostly for, we do see some effect of the emotions and memory individuals with Alzheimer's disease. We definitely see in healthy adults. Now, what happens, but there are instances, right, where when individuals with Alzheimer's disease, particularly those who have dementia, are really not able to remember any details about events. And so there was this one study with someone who had a bilateral lesion to the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is that structure that processes information so that we can store that information that we learned. This individual, due to a virus, had lost the structure in both hemispheres, and he could only remember things for a few seconds. And they did this very simple experiment where they had a good guy and a bad guy. And the good guy was a researcher who would bring this guy candy. So his name was Boswell, and Boswell loved candy. And so the research assistant would bring candy. There was a neutral one who just come in and do, normal things, nothing exciting, positive or negative. And there was this other researcher who would not treat this guy that well, wouldn't bring himself, would be kind of rude to Boswell. And what they found with time is that Boswell looked forward to seeing the good researcher, even though he did not remember having seen this person at all. And he had really negative feelings towards the bad researcher, even if he could not remember it. It's so interesting. And so it shows us that there seems to be that sort of memory that's stored in a different area that's very implicit, but it still allows us to make some decisions and have that feeling about who's who, and sort of that it's just a different type of memory. And so we wondered a little bit more about how this relationship between having impaired memory and emotions work. So let's do an exercise. So think about something you're scared of, anything that scares you. I'm extremely scared of frogs, extremely, extremely scared of frogs. So if I see a frog, I am gonna freak out and run, which I usually do. And after 5 minutes of having seen the frog, I probably look like this. I'm still scared. And I know that I'm scared because I just saw a frog, because I can remember that event. Now, what happens if you see a frog, but 5 minutes after, you do not remember the frog? Are you still scared, or does that emotion dissipate with the memory? In other words, do we need to explicitly remember the event in order to experience that feeling? And so that's what I aimed to answer. I wanted to know, can someone with Alzheimer's disease who has memory impairment for recent events experience a feeling that they cannot, even if they cannot remember the event that caused the emotion? And so we really wanted to understand this, because we know that the hippocampus, again, that structure, oh, here, there's my mouse. This structure that is here, again, is impaired. It's actually one of the first areas to lose neurons and become impaired and atrophy in individuals with Alzheimer's disease. So we know that that's one of the reasons why individuals with Alzheimer's disease cannot store new information. But right by the hippocampus is the amygdala. So the amygdala is the structure that helps us process emotions. So every time someone experiences fear, this area lights up. And what's interesting with Alzheimer's is that even though there are changes early on in the disease process, there are some parts of the amygdala that are still intact, and therefore it's probably one of the reasons why individuals with Alzheimer's can really experience emotions for a longer time, even when memory is impaired. And so how did we address this? So we hypothesized, based on some previous research, that these individuals with memory impairment would be able to experience an emotion even if they could not remember the event itself, in part because we knew that they have some of the amygdala intact. And so we showed them some films. We showed them a set of films first who had been validated and known to cause sadness. And we also showed them a set of films that we knew and were valid at inducing happiness. And so we measured how they felt in the moment. This is mostly self-report. And so we asked them, at this time, right now, how do you feel? How amused or happy do you feel? How sad do you feel? And then we had a bunch of questions. How fearful do you feel? And or how strong is that emotion? And these individuals were not impaired enough that they could not report this type of information. And so what we did was we measured how they were feeling at the moment with this questionnaire. Then we showed them the movies. Let's say we showed them the sad films. Then we measured again how they were feeling immediately after the movies were over. Then we did a memory test. So this memory test had two components. We had a free recall. So we asked them, tell me about what you just saw, as many details as you can. And so we would go, tell me about 3 films, and then ask them to tell us about those films. For example, one was from Schindler's List. And so they would tell, sometimes they would remember, the name of the actress and other, oh, what happened? Okay, I don't know what happened. And other details. And then we also did a recognition test where we showed them some pictures from the movies, and then we would say, do you remember having seen this? Did you just see this? Did you not see this? And then, they would say yes or no. And we had pictures that were part of the movies and pictures that were from other movies that they did not see. And then we measured again how they were feeling. This was about, so we did the memory test about 5 minutes after the films were done. We did another emotion measure about 10 minutes after the films were over. And then finally, we did another one from 25 to 30 minutes after the films were over, with the idea that we wanted to track how they were feeling over time. And then we always show them the sad films first and the happy films last, because we wanted them to leave feeling happy. We didn't want them to leave feeling sad. So we always did it in this order. What we found was that when we just looked at memory, individuals with Alzheimer's disease remembered significantly less details about the films compared to their healthy controls, who were people with similar age and education. And these were about 20 individuals with Alzheimer's disease and healthy controls. And this is very expected because, as I already mentioned, you've probably seen this before too. I lost my mouse again, but if you look at where the line is, that structures that's below, if you look at the first image on the left, that's the hippocampus. It looks like sort of a part of a donut, I guess. And if you look at the next image, you can still see the structure, but you start seeing that there's more cerebrospinal fluid around, which means that that person is losing neurons. And if you look at the last one, you can see that there's very little left of the hippocampus. There has been, that brain has already undergone a lot of damage to the hippocampus, and therefore it has more memory impairment. So this was not surprising. This sort of validated what we already know about Alzheimer's disease. But what we found was that after individuals, this is the change from baseline. And so if you look at figure A, their rate of sadness on the left and the timeline on the bottom. And you see that right after the induction, individuals were feeling way sadder than how they felt at baseline. Very expected. This is telling us that the movies worked. And then with time, they continued to experience sadness. They never actually went back to baseline. Now, again, remember that these individuals barely remember any details about the films, especially if you can see there's pretty significant difference, pretty big effect between individuals with Alzheimer's disease and the healthy controls. And this was also validated by looking at other measures where they reported experiences, greater affect, greater negative affect with time, and then less positive affect with time, which makes sense, right? The sadder you feel, the less happy you feel. And so we said, well, within the group with Alzheimer's disease, there's variety. There are some individuals who remember some details, other individuals who don't, so there's variability. And we decided, let's only look at those individuals who remember 0 details. And even some of these individuals didn't remember anything. They couldn't even remember having seen any films. And so we again see that we were successful at inducing the emotion. So after the films, they reported feeling sadder. And the vast, out of 4, 3 of them continue to feel sad. In fact, 2 of them never even went down. They continued to report feeling sad. Only 1 of them went back to baseline. And I remember this one person very vividly, where about 30 minutes after the films were over, she was crying, and she was so confused because she was like, I don't understand why I'm so sad. I feel extremely sad. And she was trying to come up with an answer of why she was feeling that way, but she could not come up with one, even though she had seen those films a few minutes before. And so something that we found was that the less details that a person remembered about the films, the sadder they felt. The more details they could remember about the films, the less sad they felt. Now, this is sort of counterintuitive, right? And I have in my mind different possible explanations. I try to think going back to when I was an undergrad and interested in memory, and try to put myself in someone's shoes that cannot remember recent events. And it may be that if there's something that makes you sad and you can't explain it, maybe that sort of feeds into that feeling, right? Whereas if you remember that they were films, you can cope with that emotion, because you can say, those were movies, like nothing really happened. And maybe that allows you to sort of regulate that emotion. But that's something that we actually don't know. And maybe I'll try to answer in the future. Then we looked at happiness, very similar, but the effect wasn't as big. And it's interesting, because we were talking about that negative versus positive effect, the positive effect being larger for individuals of this age. But the fact is that we took a break in between, and people would go back to baseline. They would feel better, and people are pretty happy at baseline. So it's just harder to make someone happier, which is nice. But since you're already feeling pretty good, it's just harder to see a difference from baseline. But yet individuals who had Alzheimer's disease and obviously a memory impairment, they experience happiness over time, and very consistent with what we found with sadness. And so again, I found this very striking. There was this one participant who said, I feel like all my emotions and feeling are rushing in on me. It's extremely confusing, and I do not like that feeling. So again, sort of having a really hard time regulating that emotion. And so I think that altogether what this shows us is that individuals with Alzheimer's disease can experience a feeling for a pretty long time, even if they cannot remember what made them feel that way in the first place. Now, when I published this study, it got a lot of media attention, NPR, Times, people, and I got a lot of emails from caregivers. And they would tell me, this is so validating, because I've seen this in my father or whoever they were caring for, where if something happened, they would sort of continue to be in that mood, but they couldn't really pinpoint why they were feeling that way. And again, it sort of showed too, to me, I think it has a huge impact, particularly on caregivers, sort of saying, look, if you visit your mom and you bring her favorite ice cream, and a few minutes, maybe half hour later, she doesn't remember even having eaten an ice cream. But that ice cream made her happy, and so you've made her happy, even she can't remember what caused that emotion. And that happiness may last. Obviously, then the contrary is true. If there's something that causes them to feel angry or sad, obviously I didn't test anger, but particularly at least sadness, that sadness will also linger even if they cannot recall that event. So after we did this study, we started wondering about the impact of music. So I think we can all think about a song that really makes us feel sad, or really makes us feel happy. But not only does it makes us experience an emotion, it also brings back memories. And so we wanted to look a little bit more into this. Now, as I mentioned, we know that listening to music can promote very pleasurable responses. Even when we listen to sad music, it can still have a pretty good impact on us. We also know that individuals with Alzheimer's disease can also perceive, recognize emotions conveyed by music. So they can also experience an emotion caused by that song. They can recognize melodies, and also sometimes titles or familiar songs, or at least recognize the melody. Actually, so since I'm going to go into music, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions about the previous study. Okay. One of the reasons why music can induce pleasurable feelings is because music can engage neural reward systems. And you may be wondering, because I get this question a lot, is if there's so much damage that goes on into individuals who have Alzheimer's disease, and as many of you may have already heard about the preclinical stage, right, that this starts 2 decades before people show memory. So what this means is that by the time someone has dementia, the brain has already undergone a lot of damage. So how is it that with so much damage, individuals with dementia caused by Alzheimer's disease can still sort of sing to that melody and recognize these melodies? And in part is because their music listening involves a lot of structures in the brain. And so it's a very complicated system, and this is sort of, I'm not going to go into detail on these regions, but I just wanted to show you how complex it is. It's not the hippocampus, it's not the amygdala, it's a orchestra of structures sort of dancing together to help someone process. And so we do have the amygdala, right? Because we need that emotional processing. We do have the hippocampus, but we also have a lot of other structures that we know are important for feeling, for controlling, for storing, for remembering. Is where we store those types of memories that are implicit. So the other day, I put a music station in Pandora about music to listen when I was a teenager, and I was surprised I knew the lyrics. I was like, "Where are these lyrics coming from?" I thought I didn't remember this song. And in part, it's because that music is stored in those regions that where other memories like riding a bike are stored, right? Things that we do automatic. We're not really thinking about them. And so again, music processing involves many, many regions. And so what we know about music and memories is that when you're exposed to music, you have enhanced projections of dopamine. So dopamine is one of those good feelings neurotransmitters. So it's involved in pleasure. It's involved and in it's also involved in addiction because it causes those pleasurable experiences. It also causes regulation of autonomic nervous system, right? So the way we experience feelings is because there is a reaction from our autonomic nervous system from our body. Oops. And then this causes enhanced default network connectivity. So the default network is a network that's very much involved in memory. It's very much involved in Alzheimer's disease and comprises a lot of those structures that I just showed you in that picture. So basically what it's saying is that it sort of activates those regions that are involved with emotions, with memory, and just with processing information that also was stored at some point. And then these leads us to pay more attention. It leads to better learning and memory. And it also leads us to autobiographical memory. So autobiographical memory is memory for sort of information that has a lot of meaning to us. So like our wedding. So, explaining our wedding is an autobiographical memory. It's something about me. It was an event, and it's an event that defines a big chunk of my story. And so music through this system or through this mechanism can help us sort of retrieve those types of memories. And so we decided to replicate that same experiment, but this time using music. We wanted to know, one, there's actually a lot of anecdotes about music inducing emotions in individuals with Alzheimer's disease, but there's actually not a lot of data showing that. So we wanted to know, one, can we actually change how someone is feeling just with music? And two, again, does that emotion that on this time is caused by music, does that last even if the person cannot remember having listened to music or what songs they listened to? And so what we did was that in collaboration with the caregiver and the individual with Alzheimer's disease, we asked them to come up with their top 10 songs or 10 songs that provoked a sad memory, and 10 songs that provoked a happy memory, or not necessarily memory, but sort of a feeling, and to rank them from the one that caused the sort of the more arousal to less arousal. And then we chose the top 5. We chose the parts of the songs that were better recognized, or and then we did like a composite of those songs that the people would listen to. So this was personalized to each participant. Same thing, we measured how they were feeling, then we had them hear the music, we measured how they were feeling immediately after, we did the memory test. Again, we played some songs, some that they had heard, some that they hadn't, and asked them if they had heard that song a few minutes before. And then we also asked them to tell what songs they had listened to. And if they didn't know the title, they could sing the song. So we were looking for different ways that we knew they recognized the song. And then we measured the emotion again. Same thing. Oh, sorry, not supposed to say films. We first did the sadness induction, and then we did happiness. Again, we wanted them to leave feeling happy. Now, same thing as with the other study, not surprising. In this case, individuals with Alzheimer's are red, and individuals who are healthy are in blue. And not surprisingly, those individuals who had Alzheimer's disease recalled significantly less than individuals who were healthy, cognitively healthy. And again, we basically found the same pattern that we saw with films. On this case, we do see the baseline. So see, they were not feeling sad when we first asked them. And then after they heard the songs, they reported feeling they reported feeling sadder, and they continued to experience sadness over time, very similar to healthy controls who could remember the songs. And the same thing happened for happiness. In this case, actually, we see the same thing. They were feeling pretty happy at baseline. And so the difference is not as significant, but we do still see a change from baseline, and they continue to experience that happiness over time. And so I want to thank my collaborators. This is some work that we have now under review. I guess it goes back to showing how powerful music can be, and sort of going back to why it may be that individuals with dementia or memory impairment are still able to sing along or to recognize some of the songs, is because a lot of those structures that we know store information about music are still pretty intact until later stages. So on this case, they couldn't remember the songs that they just heard, but if you play the song right now, they would be able to say some of the lyrics, so they may at least remember the melody. They may talk about some emotion, some memory from whenever the song was popular. If it was, during their childhood or teenage years, they may come up with a memory that's associated with that time. So definitely music is very powerful. We still don't know a whole lot about it, and it's definitely something that people are paying more attention to. And so this project was done in collaboration with Dr. Belfi, who's a neuroscientist that focuses on studying music and autobiographical memories, with Dr. Rashki Hernandez. She's a music therapist, and really what she wants to do is use this research to develop music therapy for individuals with Alzheimer's disease, and not only try to understand what's the best way to deliver music therapy. And Dan Turnell is our mentor and leader. So I want to thank you all for listening, and I welcome all questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guzman Velez. I'm going to stop recording so that people can feel free to ask any questions. 1 second.